In the late afternoon, under an orange sky, an adult lion walks alone down a remote dirt road. Suddenly, he stops, lifts his head, and sniffs the air intently, hearing a high-pitched sound from the bushes. Among dirty cloths and dry leaves, a human baby is crying, abandoned in the middle of the road. The lion approaches, circles slowly, and in silence lies next to the baby, blocking any possible threat. In the distance, a hyena's roar breaks the air as headlights appear around the curve. The lion lifts his head, stares at the lights, and remains still, standing between the baby and danger. For a second, no one knows what will happen. Love stories with animals? Then subscribe now and never miss one. Thanks for following us. Now, back to our story. The sun was beginning its descent behind the towering peaks of the Rocky Mountains, painting the Colorado wilderness in brilliant shades of amber and gold. The crisp autumn air carried the scent of pine and the distant promise of winter snow. Through this vast expanse of untamed beauty, a magnificent mountain lion moved with the fluid grace that only apex predators possess. Marcus, as the local wildlife biologists had named him after tracking him for 3 years, was a specimen of pure wilderness majesty. His powerful frame rippled with muscle beneath his tawny coat, and his pale golden eyes held the wisdom of countless seasons survived in these unforgiving mountains. At 8 years old, he was in his prime, respected and feared throughout his territorial range that stretched across nearly 50 square miles of the Colorado National Forest. On this particular evening, Marcus was following his usual route back to his favorite resting spot among the granite outcroppings near Cascade Creek. The familiar trail wound through dense stands of aspen and pine, their leaves whispering secrets only the wilderness could understand. He had spent the day hunting, successfully taking down a young elk that would sustain him for several days. His belly was full, his territory secure, and the peaceful rhythm of his solitary existence continued as it had for years. But as he rounded a bend where the forest trail intersected with an old logging road, something made him freeze mid-stride. His ears swiveled forward, catching a sound that didn't belong in his wild domain. It wasn't the familiar rustle of small prey or the distant howl of wolves. It wasn't the snap of branches under the weight of deer or the chittering of squirrels. Preparing for winter, it was crying, human crying. Marcus lowered his massive head, his nostrils flaring as he tested the air. The scent was unmistakable, foreign and vulnerable. Every instinct he possessed as a predator should have told him to either investigate for potential danger or simply move away from this human intrusion into his world. Instead, something deeper, something that defied explanation, drew him forward. Moving, with the silent stealth that made mountain lions legendary hunters, Marcus approached the source of the sound. Behind a cluster of wild elderberry bushes, partially concealed by scattered pine needles and what appeared to be torn fabric, lay something that made the great cat's world shift on its axis. A baby. A human infant, no more than a few months old, wrapped in a thin blanket that provided little protection against the mountain's evening chill. The child's face was red from crying, tiny fists waving helplessly in the air. The little one was alone, completely and utterly abandoned in one of the most remote sections of the Colorado wilderness. For several heartbeats, Marcus remained perfectly still, his powerful frame frozen as conflicting instincts warred within him. His predatory nature recognized a vulnerable creature, but something else, something that spoke to a deeper part of his consciousness, saw only helplessness that needed protection. The baby's cries grew weaker, the small voice growing hoarse, from exhaustion and cold. Without fully understanding why, Marcus made a decision that would defy everything scientists thought they knew about mountain lion behavior. Instead of walking away or viewing the infant as potential prey, the great cat slowly lowered himself to the ground beside the abandoned child. His massive body formed a natural windbreak against the chilling mountain air. The warmth radiating from his thick coat began to envelope the baby, and gradually the desperate crying subsided to soft whimpers. Marcus positioned himself so that his body created a protective barrier on three sides, his keen senses alert to every sound and scent that might indicate approaching danger. As darkness began to settle over the mountains, Marcus remained vigilant. His golden eyes swept the surrounding forest, his ears constantly moving to catch the slightest sound. Bears still roamed these mountains, and while they typically avoided confrontation with mountain lions, a hungry black bear might be attracted by the scent of human presence. Coyotes traveled in packs and could pose a threat to something so small and defenseless. Even other mountain lions, if they ventured into Marcus's territory, might view the situation as an opportunity. But Marcus had made his choice. Something in the baby's helpless cries had awakened a protective instinct that transcended species boundaries. Perhaps it reminded him of his own cubs from years past, though he had never been involved in their care as male mountain lions typically were. Perhaps it was simply the response of a creature who understood what it meant to be alone in an unforgiving world. The infant, now warmed by the big cat's presence, began to quiet. Tiny fingers grasped at the air before settling against the soft fur of Marcus's foreleg. The baby's breathing became more regular, and the dangerous blue tinge began to fade from the small lips. Meanwhile, 20 miles away in the small mountain town of Pine Ridge, Dr. Sarah Mitchell was preparing for what she thought would be a routine night shift at the Colorado Wildlife Research Station. As the lead biologist for the region's mountain lion monitoring program, Sarah had dedicated the last 12 years of her life to understanding and protecting these magnificent predators. Her work involved tracking collared animals, monitoring their hunting patterns, and studying their territorial behaviors. Sarah was a woman who had found her calling in the wild places of the world. At 38, she possessed the kind of rugged beauty that came from spending more time under open skies than under fluorescent lights. Her auburn hair was usually pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her green eyes held the intensity of someone who had stared down charging bears and faced the raw power of nature on its own terms. Tonight, she was reviewing data from the GPS collars when her radio crackled to life. "Sarah, this is Tom down at the visitor center. We just got a strange call from a hiker who was coming down the Cascade Trail about an hour ago. He reported hearing what sounded like a baby crying, somewhere near the old logging road intersection." Sarah frowned, setting down her coffee mug. "A baby? Tom, that doesn't make sense. That area is 15 miles from the nearest access point. No one takes infants on those kinds of hikes." "I know it sounds crazy," Tom's voice continued through the static, "but the guy seemed really shaken up, said he wanted to investigate, but was afraid of what he might find in the dark. He gave us GPS coordinates." Something cold settled in Sarah's stomach. In her years of wilderness work, she had learned to trust the instincts that kept her alive in dangerous situations. Right now, those instincts were screaming that something was seriously wrong. "I'm heading out there," she said, already reaching for her field gear. "Contact Jake and see if he can meet me at the trailhead. And Tom, call the sheriff's department. If there really is a baby out there, we're going to need backup." As Sarah loaded her truck with emergency supplies, she couldn't shake the feeling that this night was going to change everything. The GPS coordinates the hiker had provided were in the heart of Marcus's territory, an area she knew as well as her own backyard. If there truly was an abandoned infant in those mountains, it would take a miracle for the child to survive the night. What she didn't know was that the miracle had already arrived, in the form of a mountain lion who had chosen compassion over instinct, protection over predation. Miles away, under a canopy of stars that seemed close enough to touch, Marcus maintained his vigil beside a baby who had somehow found the most unlikely guardian in all the wilderness. The beam of Sarah's high-powered flashlight cut through the darkness as she made her way up the treacherous mountain trail. Behind her, Jake Rodriguez, a fellow wildlife biologist and her research partner for the past 5 years, struggled to keep pace. His breathing was labored, not from the altitude, but from the anxiety that had been building since they received the emergency call. "Sarah, slow down!" Jake called out. Jake, his voice barely audible over the sound of their boots crunching against the frost-covered trail. "We need to approach this systematically. If there really is a baby out here, rushing in could make things worse." Jake was right, and Sarah knew it. At 42, he was the more experienced of the two, a former park ranger who had seen enough wilderness emergencies to know that panic rarely led to successful rescues. His methodical approach had saved lives before, including Sarah's own, during a close encounter with a grizzly bear 3 years earlier. Sarah forced herself to stop, taking deep breaths of the thin mountain air. "You're right. I just can't stop thinking about a baby being out here alone. The temperature is dropping fast, and if the report is accurate, that child has been exposed to the elements for hours." "I know," Jake said, checking his GPS device. "We're about half a mile from the coordinates. Let's radio base camp and let them know our position." As Jake made contact with the research station, Sarah's mind raced through the possibilities. In 12 years of working in these mountains, she had never encountered anything like this. Hikers occasionally got lost, and they had dealt with their share of search and rescue operations, but an abandoned infant in the wilderness was unprecedented. The terrain began to level out as they approached the old logging road intersection. Sarah's flashlight swept across the landscape, illuminating the ghostly white trunks of aspen trees and the dark silhouettes of towering pines. Everything appeared normal until her beam caught something unusual about 50 yards ahead. "Jake," she whispered, grabbing his arm, "turn off your light." They stood in darkness for a moment, allowing their eyes to adjust. In the pale moonlight, Sarah could make out a large shape lying in the middle of the clearing where the trail met the old road. Her heart began to race as she recognized the distinctive silhouette. "That's a mountain lion," Jake breathed. "A big one." Sarah's mind immediately went to Marcus. She had been tracking him for 3 years and knew his territorial patterns better than anyone. This was definitely his range, and the size of the animal matched his impressive frame. "It's Marcus," she said with certainty. "But what's he doing just lying there in the open? That's not normal behavior." They observed the scene for several minutes, waiting for the cat to move or show signs of agitation. Mountain lions were notoriously elusive, and encountering one in the wild was rare, even for experienced wildlife biologists. Seeing one simply lying motionless in an exposed area was virtually unheard of. "We need to get closer," Sarah decided. "Something's not right." Moving with extreme caution, they advanced toward the clearing. Sarah's training had taught her to read animal body language, and everything about Marcus's posture suggested he was alert but not aggressive. His ears were upright and rotating, constantly monitoring their approach, but he made no move to flee or attack. As they drew within 30 yards, Sarah's flashlight beam revealed something that made her breath catch in her throat. There, nestled against Marcus's massive side, was a small bundle wrapped in what appeared to be a baby blanket. "Dear God," Jake whispered. The report was true. The sight was so extraordinary that for a moment both biologists stood frozen, in disbelief, Marcus, a predator capable of taking down an adult elk, was lying protectively beside a human infant. The mountain lion's body was positioned to shield the baby from the wind, and his alert posture suggested he was actively guarding the child. "This is impossible," Jake said, his voice filled with awe. "Mountain lions don't exhibit protective behavior toward human young. It goes against every documented pattern of behavior." Sarah's scientific mind was equally baffled, but her maternal instincts overrode her amazement. The baby was alive. She could see the small rise and fall of the blanket, but they needed to act quickly. Mountain temperatures could be fatal to an infant, even with the warmth provided by Marcus's body. "We need to approach slowly," Sarah said, pulling out her emergency kit. "I've worked with Marcus for years. He knows my scent and my voice. If anyone can get close, it's me." "Sarah, that's a wild predator protecting what he perceives as vulnerable offspring. He could attack without warning." "Look at him, Jake. Really look at him. This isn't predatory behavior. I've never seen anything like it, but Marcus isn't acting aggressive. He's acting protective." Sarah began to move forward slowly, speaking in the calm, measured tone she used when working with captured animals. "Easy, Marcus. It's Sarah. You know me, big guy. I'm here to help." The mountain lion's golden eyes fixed on her, and his massive head tilted slightly. There was an intelligence in his gaze that sent chills down Sarah's spine. It was as if he understood not just that she was approaching, but why she was approaching. When she was within 10 feet, Marcus did something that would later be described by Jake as the most extraordinary animal behavior he had ever witnessed. The great cat slowly stood up, careful not to disturb the baby, and took several steps towards Sarah. He stopped directly in front of her, looking into her eyes with an intensity that seemed almost human. Then, in a gesture that defied explanation, Marcus turned his head toward the baby and back to Sarah, as if he were trying to communicate something specific. The message was clear. The child needed help, and somehow Marcus knew that Sarah could provide. "My God," Jake whispered from behind her. "It's like he's asking you to help." Sarah knelt down slowly, never breaking eye contact with Marcus. "I understand, boy. You've been protecting her, haven't you? You've been keeping her safe." The baby began to stir, small sounds emerging from the bundle. Sarah could see that it was indeed an infant, probably no more than 3 or 4 months old. The child appeared to be relatively healthy despite the ordeal, though clearly cold and in need of immediate medical attention. "Jake, call for a helicopter evacuation," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the emotional magnitude of the moment. "We need to get this baby to a hospital immediately." As Jake made the emergency call, Sarah began to examine the scene more carefully. Something about the situation didn't add up. How had an infant ended up in such a remote location? The nearest road accessible to regular vehicles was miles away, and the terrain was far too rough for anyone to have simply wandered off with a baby. Her flashlight beam caught something glinting in the dirt near where Marcus had been lying. Moving carefully, keeping one eye on the mountain lion who continued to watch her every movement, Sarah approached the object. It was a small piece of metal, possibly from a vehicle. Nearby, she noticed tire tracks that looked relatively fresh. "Jake," she called out, "when you're finished with that call, I need you to see this." The discovery of vehicle tracks raised disturbing questions. The old logging road was officially closed to motor vehicle traffic, and only authorized personnel with special permits could legally access this area. Someone had driven up here recently, and given the presence of the abandoned baby, the implications were deeply troubling. As they waited for the helicopter, Marcus maintained his vigil. He'd moved a short distance away to give Sarah access to the baby, but he never took his eyes off the child. His behavior continued to defy everything they knew about mountain lion psychology. the protective instinct he was displaying toward. A human infant was unprecedented in scientific literature. The helicopter is 15 minutes out, Jake reported. I also contacted Sheriff Martinez. She's assembling a team to investigate the vehicle tracks. Sarah gently lifted the baby, wrapping the child in emergency blankets from her field kit. The infant was a little girl, probably Hispanic based on her features, with dark hair and remarkably alert dark eyes. Despite her ordeal, she seemed relatively unharmed, though hypothermia was a serious concern. As the distant sound of helicopter rotors began to echo through the mountains, Marcus backed away into the tree line, but he didn't disappear entirely. The mountain lion positioned himself where he could still observe the proceedings, his golden eyes reflecting the helicopter's searchlight as it prepared to land. The rescue went smoothly, with paramedics quickly stabilizing the baby and preparing her for transport to Denver General Hospital. As the helicopter lifted off, carrying the infant to safety, Sarah noticed that Marcus emerged from the trees. The great cat stood in the clearing, watching the aircraft disappear into the night sky. He's watching her leave, Jake observed, his voice filled with wonder. It's like he understands that she's going to be safe now. After several minutes, Marcus turned and began walking back toward the forest. But before he disappeared into the darkness, he stopped and looked back at Sarah one final time. In that brief moment, there was an understanding between them that transcended species boundaries. The mountain lion had done something extraordinary, and somehow they both knew this was far from over. As the sounds of the wilderness returned to normal, Sarah began collecting evidence from the scene. The tire tracks, the metal fragment, and the circumstances of the abandonment all pointed to something far more sinister than a simple case of parental abandonment. Someone had deliberately left this baby in one of the most remote and dangerous areas of the Colorado wilderness, and the only reason she had survived was because of a mountain lion who had chosen compassion over instinct. Sheriff Elena Martinez arrived at the scene just as dawn was breaking over the Colorado Rockies. At 55, she had served as the elected sheriff of Cascade County for 12 years, and in that time, she had dealt with everything from cattle rustling to missing hikers. But as she examined the tire tracks and listened to Sarah's account of the night's events, she knew this case was unlike anything she had encountered before. So let me understand this correctly, Eleanor said, crouching beside the tire impressions. In the dirt, a mountain lion was found protecting an abandoned infant, and these tracks suggest someone drove up here specifically to leave the baby in this remote location. That's exactly what we found, Sarah confirmed, still struggling to process the extraordinary events herself. Marcus, the mountain lion, was actively guarding the baby when we arrived. His behavior was completely unprecedented. Elena had known Sarah for years and trusted her professional judgment implicitly. If Sarah said the mountain lion had been protecting the baby, then that's exactly what had happened, regardless of how extraordinary it seemed. These tire tracks are from a large vehicle, Elena observed, using her measuring tape to document the impressions. Probably a full-size SUV or pickup truck. The tread pattern is distinctive, and I can see evidence of rapid acceleration here, which suggests whoever left the baby was in a hurry to get away. Jake, who had been documenting the scene with his camera, approached with a concerning discovery. Sheriff, you need to see this. I found something about 20 yards into the tree line. They followed Jake to a cluster of pine trees, where he pointed out several items that had been hastily discarded. A plastic baby bottle, an empty box of infant formula, and most disturbing of all, a hospital bracelet that had been cut off. Elena, carefully bagged the hospital bracelet, noting the information printed on it. Baby girl Vasquez, born October 15th. That was just 6 weeks ago. This bracelet is from St. Mary's Hospital in Denver. Vasquez, Sarah repeated. That could be the baby's name or it could be the mother's name. Either way, it gives us a starting point. As Elena continued processing the scene, her radio crackled with an urgent message from her deputy. Sheriff Martinez, we just received a report of a suspicious vehicle matching the description you put out earlier. Deputy Chen spotted it at a gas station in Pine Ridge about 20 minutes ago. The driver took off when he approached. Copy that. What's the license plate? Colorado plates, Adam David 5789. The vehicle is a dark blue Ford Expedition with damage to the front bumper. Eleanor felt her pulse quicken. Pine Ridge was only 30 miles from their current location, easily accessible. Via the mountain highway, if someone had dumped the baby here and then driven to Pine Ridge, they could have made the trip in under an hour. Issue an APB on that vehicle, Elena ordered. I want every law enforcement agency in a 100-mile radius looking for it. And contact St. Mary's Hospital. I need to speak with someone about this bracelet immediately. While Elena coordinated the manhunt, Sarah found herself drawn back to the spot where Marcus had been protecting the baby. Something about the mountain lion's behavior continued to puzzle her. In 3 years of tracking him, she had never seen Marcus venture this close to human activity areas. His territory typically encompassed the deeper wilderness regions, far from trails and access roads. "Jake," she called out, "look at this." Sarah was examining the GPS data from Marcus's collar, which transmitted his location every 4 hours. The information painted a picture that raised even more questions. According to the tracking data, Marcus has been in this area for the past 18 hours, Sarah explained. But here's what's strange. He normally avoids this intersection completely. His usual travel routes take him at least 2 miles north of here. So what brought him here? Jake asked. That's what I'm trying to figure out. Either it's an incredible coincidence, or somehow Marcus knew to be here. Elena rejoined them, having completed her initial investigation. I just spoke with Dr. Patricia Williams, the head of pediatrics at St. Mary's Hospital. Baby girl Vasquez was born to a 16-year-old mother named Isabella Vasquez. Isabella and the baby disappeared from the hospital 2 days after the birth. The hospital staff assumed it was a case of a teenage mother being overwhelmed and leaving, against medical advice. But now we know it was something much more serious, Sarah said. Exactly. Dr. Williams is sending over all the medical records and documentation. She's also provided a description of Isabella, 16 years old, Hispanic, about 5 feet 2 inches tall with long black hair. The concerning part is that according to the hospital staff, Isabella seemed terrified during her entire stay and kept asking when she would be allowed to leave. The implications were becoming increasingly disturbing. Elena had seen enough human trafficking cases during her career to recognize the warning signs. A teenage mother, clearly frightened, disappearing with her newborn baby, only to have the infant turn up abandoned in a remote wilderness area, suggested something far more sinister than parental abandonment. "Sheriff," Jake interrupted, "I think you need to hear this." Jake was monitoring his radio scanner, which picked up communications from various law enforcement agencies throughout the region. The voice coming through the static belonged to a Colorado State Patrol officer. "All units, be advised. We have a vehicle pursuit in progress on Highway 285, approximately 15 miles south of Pine Ridge. Suspect vehicle matches the description from the APB, dark blue Ford Expedition with Colorado plates, Adam David 5789. Suspect is refusing to stop and driving erratically." Elena immediately grabbed her radio. "This is Sheriff Martinez. I'm responding to assist with the pursuit. That vehicle is connected to a child abandonment case." "Copy," Sheriff Martinez. Pursuit is heading north on 285 toward the National Forest. Access roads. The irony wasn't lost on any of them. The suspect was fleeing toward the very wilderness area where the baby had been abandoned, almost as if drawn back to the scene. Sarah, I need you and Jake to continue documenting this scene, Elena said, already heading toward her patrol vehicle. Process everything you can find. I have a feeling this case is going to get much bigger before it's resolved. As Elena's patrol car disappeared down the mountain road, Sarah and Jake continued their investigation. The morning sun was now fully illuminating the clearing, and in the daylight, additional evidence became visible. Sarah, come look at this, Jake called from near the tree line. There are more tire tracks here from a different vehicle. The second set of tracks was smaller, consistent with a compact car or small SUV. The tire impressions were older, possibly several days old, and they led from the main road to a spot about 50 yards from where the baby had been found. Two different vehicles, Sarah mused. Two different time periods. This is looking more and more like an organized operation. As they documented the additional tire tracks, Sarah's radio crackled with an update from the research station. Sarah, this is Tom. I just received a call from Dr. Williams at St. Mary's Hospital. She has additional information about the Vasquez, case that she thinks you should know. Go ahead, Tom. Dr. Williams reviewed the hospital records more carefully. Isabella Vasquez was brought to the hospital by a woman who claimed to be her aunt. The woman gave her name as Maria Santos and said she was Isabella's legal guardian. But when they tried to contact Maria Santos after Isabella and the baby disappeared, they discovered that the address and phone number she provided were fake. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. So Isabella was brought to the hospital by someone using a false identity. It gets worse. Dr. Williams checked with social services, and there's no record of Isabella Vasquez ever being in the care of anyone named Maria Santos. In fact, there's no record of Isabella Vasquez existing at all before she showed up at the hospital. The implications were staggering. If Isabella Vasquez didn't exist in any official records, it meant she was either living completely off the grid or her identity had been fabricated. Combined with the false guardian and the subsequent abandonment of the baby in a remote wilderness area, the evidence pointed to a sophisticated operation involving multiple people. Jake had been listening to the radio conversation, and his expression reflected the same concern Sarah was feeling. This isn't just child abandonment, he said. This is human trafficking. And somehow, a mountain lion became the only thing standing between that baby and certain demise, Sarah added, looking toward the forest where Marcus had disappeared. Their contemplation was interrupted by the sound of approaching vehicles. Elena was returning, but she wasn't alone. Following her patrol car was a convoy that included Colorado State Patrol units, an FBI mobile command vehicle, and an ambulance. Elena's voice came over the radio as the vehicles pulled into the clearing. Sarah, Jake, we apprehended the suspect in the Ford expedition. His name is Carlos Rodriguez, and he's already asking for a lawyer. But here's the concerning part. When we searched his vehicle, we found documentation suggesting this operation involves multiple babies and multiple locations throughout Colorado and New Mexico. As federal agents began establishing a mobile command post in the clearing where Marcus had performed his miraculous rescue, Sarah realized that the mountain lion's intervention had uncovered something much larger than anyone had initially suspected. The great cat hadn't just saved one baby's life, he had potentially exposed an entire network of human trafficking that had been operating undetected in the region. But even as law enforcement agencies mobilized to investigate the broader conspiracy, Sarah couldn't stop thinking about Marcus. The mountain lion's behavior remained inexplicable from a scientific standpoint, and she had a growing conviction that there was still more to this story than they understood. As if summoned by her thoughts, Jake pointed toward the tree line. "Sarah, look!" There, barely visible among the shadows of the pine trees, Marcus was watching the activity in the clearing. The mountain lion had returned, and his golden eyes seemed focused not on the law enforcement officers or their vehicles, but on the exact spot where he had protected the baby through the long, cold night. Agent Rebecca Foster of the FBI's Human Trafficking Task Force had seen many disturbing cases during her 15-year career, but as she reviewed the evidence collected from the wilderness site, she knew this operation was different. The remote location, the sophisticated false identities, and the callous abandonment of an infant suggested a level of organization that typically indicated international involvement. "Sheriff Martinez," Agent Foster called out from the mobile. "Command Center, I need to brief you on what we've discovered about Carlos Rodriguez." Elena approached the command vehicle, where multiple screens displayed photographs, documents, and mapping data. The scale of the investigation had grown exponentially in just a few hours. "Rodriguez isn't just a low-level operator," Agent Foster continued. "We ran his fingerprints and discovered he's wanted in connection with similar cases in Arizona and New Mexico. More importantly, the documents we found in his vehicle include detailed instructions for transporting what they refer to as packages to specific coordinates throughout the Southwest." "Packages?" Eleanor asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "Children, infants specifically. We've identified at least 12 other locations where babies may have been abandoned, all in remote wilderness areas where survival would be unlikely without immediate rescue." The revelation was staggering. Elena had dedicated her career to protecting the people of Cascade County, but she had never imagined that such an extensive criminal network was operating in her jurisdiction. "Agent Foster," Sarah interjected, having overheard the conversation, "I need to show you something that might be relevant to your investigation." Sarah led Agent Foster and Elena to where she had been monitoring Marcus's tracking data on her laptop. The GPS information revealed a pattern that had been nagging at her since the morning's discoveries. "This is Marcus, the mountain lion who was protecting the baby," Sarah explained, pointing to the data visualization on her screen. "Over the past 2 months, his movement patterns have changed dramatically. He's been visiting locations throughout his territory that he normally avoids, all of them near access roads or remote camping areas." Agent Foster studied the data carefully. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm not sure yet, but look at this." Sarah overlaid Marcus's recent travel routes with a map of the remote coordinates found in Rodriguez's vehicle. 3 of the locations match exactly with places Marcus has visited in the past 6 weeks. The implications were almost too extraordinary to believe. Elena stared at the overlapping data points, trying to process what she was seeing. "Are you saying this mountain lion has been monitoring these drop-off locations?" "I don't know what I'm saying," Sarah admitted, "but Marcus's behavior has been completely out of character for months. Mountain lions are territorial, but they don't typically patrol in the patterns he's been following. And now we discover that some of those patrol routes correspond to sites used by human traffickers." Agent Foster was skeptical, but intrigued. In her experience, cases involving organized crime often included unexpected elements, but a mountain lion serving as an inadvertent surveillance system was beyond anything she had encountered. "Dr. Mitchell, I need you to provide us with all of Marcus's tracking data for the past 6 months, Agent Foster decided. If there's even a possibility that his movements are connected to this trafficking network, it could help us identify other locations and potentially prevent future incidents. While Sarah prepared the tracking data, Elena received an urgent radio call from the hospital in Denver where the rescued baby had been taken. Sheriff Martinez, this is Dr. Williams at St. Mary's Hospital. I have significant news about the infant. She's healthy and responding well to treatment, but we've made an important discovery. The baby has been microchipped. Microchipped, like an animal. Exactly like an animal. It's a standard pet identification chip, but instead of containing information about an owner, it contains a series of numbers that appear to be some kind of tracking or inventory code. Elena felt sick. The idea that criminals were treating human babies like inventory, complete with tracking chips, represented a level of dehumanization that challenged everything she believed about basic human decency. Agent Foster had been listening to the conversation, and her expression reflected the same revulsion Elena was feeling. "Doctor, we need that chip information immediately. Can you remove it and send it to our forensics lab?" "The chip has already been removed and documented. I'm sending all the information to your office now." As the investigation expanded, Sarah found herself drawn back to the forest edge, where Marcus continued his vigil. The mountain lion had been watching the activity in the clearing for hours, showing no signs of leaving despite the presence of multiple vehicles and dozens of people. "He's still here," Jake observed, joining Sarah at the tree line. "I've never seen behavior like this. It's almost like he understands what's happening." Sarah had been thinking the same thing. Marcus's presence wasn't coincidental, and his decision to remain in the area, despite all the human activity, suggested something beyond normal animal behavior. "Jake, what if we're looking at this wrong?" Sarah said. "What if Marcus hasn't been randomly patrolling these locations? What if he's been investigating them?" Mountain lions don't investigate. They hunt, they eat, they reproduce, they defend territory. They don't conduct surveillance operations. But what if this particular mountain lion has learned to associate certain activities with danger to helpless young? Think about it. He found that baby and protected her. What if he's encountered this situation before? The theory was scientifically improbable, but as Sarah watched Marcus's alert posture and intelligent gaze, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to his story than they understood. Their speculation was interrupted by Agent Foster's voice, calling from the command center. "Dr. Mitchell, Sheriff Martinez, you need to hear this immediately." They hurried back to the mobile command unit, where Agent Foster was reviewing information on multiple computer screens. "We just received intelligence from our field offices in Arizona and New Mexico," Agent Foster announced. "In each of the locations where infants were abandoned and subsequently rescued, local wildlife officials reported unusual mountain lion activity in the days leading up to the discoveries." Eleanor felt the pieces of an impossible puzzle beginning to fit together. "Are you saying that mountain lions have been involved in other rescues?" "Not exactly. But in Arizona, park rangers reported a mountain lion that kept returning to a remote campground where an abandoned baby was later found. In New Mexico, a mountain lion was observed near a hiking trail for several consecutive days before hikers discovered an infant who had been left there." Sarah's mind raced as she processed this information. "Agent Foster, were any of those mountain lions wearing tracking collars?" "I don't have that information yet, but I can find out." "Why?" "Because if they were collared, we can compare their movement patterns to the trafficking locations, just like we did with Marcus. If there's a correlation, it might help us understand how extensive this network really is." As Agent Foster began coordinating with her colleagues in other states, Elena's radio buzzed with another update from her deputy. "Sheriff Martinez, we just received a call from a trucking company in Denver. They're reporting that one of their drivers, a man named David Thompson, failed to return from a delivery route that was supposed to take him through the Pine Ridge area yesterday. His truck and trailer are missing." Description: white semi-truck with a refrigerated trailer, Colorado commercial plates. The company says Thompson has been with them for 8 years with a clean record, but they're concerned because he missed 2 scheduled check-ins and isn't responding to radio calls. Elena exchanged glances with Agent Foster. A missing truck. Driver in the area where a trafficking operation had been discovered was unlikely to be coincidental. Issue an APB on the truck, Elena ordered, and contact the trucking company. I want to know exactly what Thompson was supposed to be delivering and where he was supposed to deliver it. As law enforcement agencies across the region mobilized to search for the missing truck, Sarah noticed that Marcus had moved closer to the clearing. The mountain lion was now positioned where he could clearly observe all the activity, his golden eyes moving from person to person as if he were trying to understand what they were doing. "He's learning," Sarah said quietly to Jake. "Look at how he's studying everything. He's not just watching, he's analyzing." "Sarah, you're starting to sound like you think that mountain lion is conducting his own investigation." "Maybe he is," Sarah replied, unable to shake the conviction that Marcus understood far more about the situation than any wild animal should be capable of understanding. As afternoon shadows began to lengthen across the clearing, Agent Foster received the call she had been waiting for. "Dr. Mitchell, I just spoke with wildlife officials in Arizona and New Mexico. Both of the mountain lions associated with those previous incidents were wearing GPS tracking collars. And their movement patterns show the same anomalies we've seen with Marcus. All 3 cats began exhibiting unusual patrol behaviors approximately 3 months ago, and all 3 were present at locations where trafficked infants were subsequently discovered." The evidence was becoming overwhelming. 3 different mountain lions in 3 different states had all exhibited behavior that led to the rescue of abandoned babies. The probability of coincidence was essentially 0. "Agent Foster," Sarah said, "I think these mountain lions aren't just stumbling across trafficking sites. I think they're actively tracking this network." The discovery that multiple mountain lions across 3 states had been exhibiting similar behavior patterns sent shockwaves through the investigation team. Agent Foster immediately contacted the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit in Washington, requesting expertise in animal behavior patterns and their potential connection to criminal activity. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a wildlife behavioral specialist with the FBI, joined the investigation via video conference from her office at Quantico. Her credentials included a PhD in animal psychology and 15 years of experience studying predator behavior in criminal investigations. "What you're describing challenges everything we understand about mountain lion psychology," Dr. Walsh said, reviewing the tracking data from all 3 states. Mountain lions are solitary predators with highly territorial instincts. The idea that they would coordinate activities across state lines or actively investigate human criminal behavior is scientifically unprecedented. "But the evidence is undeniable," Sarah argued, displaying the overlapping data on her laptop screen. 3 different cats, 3 different states, all exhibiting the same anomalous behavior patterns, all leading to the discovery of abandoned infants. Dr. Walsh studied the information carefully before responding. "There is one theoretical possibility. Recent research has suggested that some apex predators may be capable of recognizing patterns in human behavior that indicate distress or danger to vulnerable individuals. If these mountain lions have learned to associate certain activities with threats to helpless young, they might have developed a protective response that transcends species boundaries." Elena found the scientific discussion fascinating, but her immediate concern was the missing truck driver and the potential for additional victims. "Dr. Walsh, while we're trying to understand the mountain lion's behavior, we have a trafficking network that's still operating. Is there any way Marcus's tracking data can help us predict where they might strike next? That's an excellent question. Sheriff Martinez, Dr. Mitchell, can you show me Marcus's movement patterns for the past 24 hours? Sarah pulled up the most recent GPS data, revealing that Marcus had left the clearing but was following a specific route through the wilderness. He's heading northwest toward the old mining roads that connect to Highway 285. The same highway where the truck driver disappeared, Agent Foster noted. Dr. Walsh leaned forward, studying the data intently. If Marcus has learned to track this criminal network, he may be following scent trails or other indicators that we can't detect. Dr. Mitchell, I recommend that you and your team follow Marcus's route. He may be leading you to another location connected to the trafficking operation. The suggestion was both logical and extraordinary. The idea of following a mountain lion to investigate human criminal activity was unlike anything in law enforcement history. But given the success of Marcus's previous intervention, it seemed like their best lead. Agent Foster, Elena said, I think we should pursue this. If there's even a chance that Marcus is tracking other trafficking sites, we can't afford to ignore it. Agreed. Dr. Mitchell, how quickly can you and your team follow Marcus's trail? Sarah was already packing her field equipment. Give us 30 minutes to gear up. We can track him using the GPS collar, and if we move quickly, we should be able to catch up with him before dark. As Sarah and Jake prepared for the expedition, Elena coordinated with the Colorado State Patrol to establish roadblocks and search patterns for the missing truck. The investigation had become a race against time, with the possibility that additional victims were still in danger. Sheriff Martinez, her deputy's voice crackled over the radio. We just received information about the missing truck driver, David Thompson. His wife called to report that she received a strange phone call this morning from someone claiming to be Thompson, but she says it didn't sound like him. What do you mean? She says the voice was shaky, like he was scared or being forced to speak. The caller told her that his truck had broken down and he would be delayed getting home, but Mrs. Thompson says her husband always calls her directly on her cell phone. This call came from an unknown number to their landline. Elena felt her stomach tighten. If Thompson was being forced to make phone calls to cover for his absence, it suggested he was alive but in serious danger. Did we trace the number? It came from a prepaid cell phone purchased with cash in Denver yesterday. No way to track the buyer. Agent Foster had been monitoring the conversation, and she immediately began issuing orders to her team. I want surveillance footage from every store in Denver that sells prepaid phones. Someone bought that phone yesterday, and they're connected to this operation. Meanwhile, Sarah and Jake had begun following Marcus's GPS trail through the wilderness. The mountain lion was moving steadily northwest, following game trails and natural corridors that would be invisible to most humans. His route seemed purposeful, suggesting he had a specific destination in mind. Sarah, look at this, Jake said, studying his GPS device. Marcus's route is taking him directly toward the old Copper Creek mine. That area has been abandoned for 20 years, but there are still access roads that connect to the highway system. Dichum. The abandoned mine complex was located in one of the most remote areas of the national forest. If criminals were using it as a base of operations, it would provide perfect cover for their activities. The old mining roads were barely passable, but could accommodate trucks, and the isolated location would make detection unlikely. Jake, radio the command center. Tell them we think Marcus is heading toward Copper Creek Mine. That could be where they're holding Thompson and possibly other victims. As they continued tracking Marcus through increasingly rugged terrain, Sarah's radio buzzed with an urgent message from Agent Foster. Dr. Mitchell, we just made a significant breakthrough. The microchip removed from the baby contained a GPS Coordinate that corresponds to a warehouse facility in Denver. We've dispatched teams to investigate, but I want you to know that the coordinates for the Copper Creek mine area are also embedded in the chip's data. Agent Foster, that means the baby was tagged with information about multiple locations. She wasn't just abandoned randomly, she was part of a larger distribution system. Exactly. Dr. Mitchell, be extremely careful. If Marcus is leading you to an active trafficking site, you could be walking into a dangerous situation. Sarah and Jake were now less than a mile from Marcus's current position, according to the GPS data. The terrain had become increasingly challenging, with steep rocky slopes and dense vegetation that made progress slow and difficult. Sarah, I can hear something, Jake whispered, holding up his hand for silence. In the distance, they could hear the sound of a diesel engine running. It was coming from the direction of the old mine complex, and the steady rumble suggested a large vehicle that had been idling for an extended period. That could be Thompson's truck, Sarah said quietly. They approached the sound cautiously, using the natural cover of boulders and pine trees to avoid detection. As they crested a small ridge overlooking the mine site, they saw a scene that confirmed their worst fears. Below them, in a clearing near the abandoned mine buildings, sat a white semi-truck with a refrigerated trailer. Several men were moving around the vehicle, and even from their elevated position, Sarah and Jake could see that something was seriously wrong with the situation. Jake, we need to call for backup immediately, Sarah whispered. This is definitely not a legitimate trucking operation. But as Jake reached for his radio, they heard a low growl from behind them. Both biologists froze, knowing that sound could only come from one source. Slowly turning around, they found themselves face to face with Marcus. The mountain lion was crouched on a rock outcropping about 20 feet away, his golden eyes fixed not on them, but on the activity below in the mine clearing. His posture was alert and focused, the stance of a predator preparing to act. He's been watching them, Sarah breathed. Marcus has been conducting surveillance. As if understanding her words, Marcus looked directly at Sarah and then back toward the truck below. The mountain lion's message was clear. He had led them to this location for a reason, and the situation required immediate action. Jake managed to make radio contact with the command center, whispering urgently into his handset. Agent Foster, we've located what appears to be Thompson's truck at the Copper Creek mine site. We can see multiple suspects and suspicious activity. We need immediate backup. Copy that. Teams are en route to your location. Do not attempt to intervene until backup arrives. But as they watched the scene below, Sarah realized that waiting might not be an option. Through binoculars, she could see that the men were preparing to move the truck, and if they left the area before law enforcement arrived, the trail might go cold again. Marcus seemed to sense the urgency of the situation. The mountain lion rose from his crouch and began moving down the slope toward the mine clearing, his movements silent and purposeful. Sarah, we can't let him approach those men alone, Jake said. If they're armed, Marcus could be in serious danger. Sarah found herself facing an impossible decision. Following a mountain lion into a potentially violent confrontation with armed criminals violated every safety protocol she had ever learned. But Marcus had already saved one life, and his tracking abilities had led them to what appeared to be a major trafficking operation. Jake, Marcus isn't just a mountain lion anymore, Sarah said, making her decision. He's our partner in this investigation, and partners don't abandon each other. Sarah's decision to follow Marcus toward the mine complex was driven by instinct rather than logic. Every aspect of her scientific training told her that approaching armed criminals with only a mountain lion as backup was reckless. But something deeper compelled her to trust the extraordinary animal that had already defied every principle of predator behavior. As they descended the rocky slope, Jake maintaining reluctant pace beside her, Sarah kept her radio on an open channel so that Agent Foster and the approaching backup teams could monitor the situation in real time. "Agent Foster, we're approaching the perimeter of the mine site," Sarah whispered into her radio. "Marcus is leading us toward what appears to be a secondary building behind the truck. There's definitely human activity here. Dr. Mitchell, I strongly advise you to maintain your distance until tactical teams arrive. ETA is 15 minutes. 15 minutes felt like an eternity as Sarah watched the criminals below, preparing to move their operation. Through her binoculars, she could see at least 4 men loading equipment into the truck, their movements urgent and coordinated. Whatever they were doing, they were clearly preparing to abandon this location quickly. Marcus had positioned himself behind a large boulder about 50 yards from the nearest building. His behavior was unlike anything Sarah had observed in 3 years of studying him. The mountain lion wasn't exhibiting typical predatory stalking behavior. Instead, he seemed to be conducting tactical reconnaissance, moving from position to observe different aspects of the criminal operation. "Sarah, look at the trailer," Jake whispered, pointing toward the refrigerated unit attached to the semi-truck. Through her binoculars, Sarah could see that the trailer's doors were slightly open and there appeared to be movement inside. Her heart raced as she realized what they might be witnessing. "Agent Foster, I think there are people inside that refrigerated trailer. This isn't just a trafficking transfer point, it's an active transport operation." "Copy that. Tactical teams are moving to surround the area now. Do not engage until we're in position." But Marcus had other plans. The mountain lion suddenly broke from his concealed position and began moving directly toward the truck. His approach was silent and purposeful, using the natural terrain and abandoned mining equipment as cover. "He's going for the trailer," Sarah realized. "Marcus knows there are people inside who need help." The first criminal to notice Marcus was a heavy-set man wearing a baseball cap who had been standing guard near the truck's cab. His shout of alarm echoed across the mine site. "There's a mountain lion! Everyone get in the vehicles!" The effect was immediate and chaotic. The 4 men scrambled toward the truck and a smaller SUV parked nearby, abandoning whatever task they had been performing. Their panic was palpable, and Sarah realized that these urban criminals were completely unprepared to deal with a wild predator. Marcus used their confusion to his advantage, positioning himself between the criminals and the trailer. The mountain lion's massive frame and threatening posture effectively prevented anyone from approaching the back of the truck, where the captives were being held. "This is incredible," Jake breathed. "He's creating a protective perimeter around the victims." Sarah's radio crackled with Agent Foster's voice. "All units move in now. The suspects are distracted, and we have a clear tactical advantage." The response was swift and coordinated. FBI tactical teams emerged from multiple positions around the mine site, their black-clad figures appearing from behind buildings and rock formations like shadows. Coming to life, Colorado State Patrol units blocked the access roads, preventing any possibility of escape. "FBI, everyone on the ground immediately!" Agent Foster's amplified voice echoed across the clearing as she led the tactical team into position. The criminals, already panicked by Marcus's presence, offered no resistance. The sight of a mountain lion, combined with the sudden appearance of federal agents, had completely overwhelmed their ability to respond rationally. Within minutes, all 4 suspects were in custody, their hands secured behind their backs as they lay face down in the dirt. But Marcus remained focused on the trailer. The mountain lion approached the partially open doors and began making low vocalizations, sounds that Sarah had never heard him produce before. They were almost like calls or attempts at communication. Agent Foster, Marcus is trying to communicate with whoever is inside the trailer, Sarah reported. I think he's letting them know that help has arrived. Agent Foster approached the trailer cautiously, her weapon drawn, but pointed away from Marcus. The mountain lion looked at her briefly, then stepped aside, as if understanding that she was there to help. Hello? Is anyone in there? This is the FBI. You're safe now. A weak voice responded from inside the trailer. Help us, please, we can't get out. What Agent Foster found inside the refrigerated trailer would haunt her for the rest of her career. David Thompson, the missing truck driver, was bound and gagged in one corner, conscious but clearly traumatized. In another section of the trailer, separated by makeshift barriers, were three young women who appeared to be in their late teens or early 20s, all showing signs of prolonged captivity. We need paramedics immediately, Agent Foster called into her radio. Multiple victims, all alive but requiring immediate medical attention. As emergency medical personnel began treating the victims, Sarah noticed that Marcus had positioned himself where he could observe the entire rescue operation. The mountain lion's posture had changed from alert guardian to something that almost resembled satisfaction, as if he understood that his mission had been accomplished. David Thompson, after receiving initial medical treatment, was able to provide crucial information about the trafficking network. They forced me to drive predetermined routes, he explained to Agent Foster. They had a schedule of pickups and drop-offs throughout Colorado, New Mexico, and Arizona. This was just one stop on a circuit that covers hundreds of miles. How long have they been using your truck? 3 days. They hijacked me at a rest stop and said they would release me after this final delivery. But I heard them talking, and I don't think they intended to let any of us go. Agent Foster's expression hardened as she processed this information. Mr. Thompson, do you remember any of the other locations they mentioned? They had a list, remote areas mostly, places where they said packages could be safely disposed of if necessary. The clinical language used by the traffickers to describe human beings reinforced the horrific nature of their operation. These weren't criminals who had accidentally stumbled into trafficking. They were part of a sophisticated network that treated people as disposable commodities. As the rescue operation continued, Sarah approached Agent Foster with a troubling realization. Agent Foster, if Marcus led us to this location, and if he's been tracking this network for months, there might be other sites where people are still being held. What are you suggesting, Dr. Mitchell? I'm suggesting that Marcus's tracking data might contain the locations of every trafficking site in this region. If we can decode his movement patterns, we might be able to identify and rescue additional victims. Agent Foster immediately grasped the implications. Dr. Mitchell, I need you to analyze every location Marcus has visited in the past 6 months. Cross-reference them with any reports of missing persons, suspicious activity, or unexplained animal behavior. If there are more victims out there, we need to find them immediately. As federal agents processed the crime scene and transported the rescued victims to hospitals, Sarah began the complex task of analyzing months of GPS data. The pattern that emerged was both remarkable and disturbing. Marcus hadn't just stumbled across trafficking sites randomly. His movement data revealed a systematic surveillance pattern that covered an area spanning 3 states. The mountain lion had been conducting his own investigation, visiting and revisiting locations with a thoroughness that would have impressed professional law enforcement. Jake, look at this, Sarah said, displaying the analyzed data on her laptop. Marcus has visited 17 different remote locations in the past 6 months. 14 of them correspond to coordinates found in the trafficking documentation we've recovered. What about the other 3? That's what worries me. If the pattern holds, those 3 locations are trafficking sites that we haven't discovered yet. Agent Foster, who had been coordinating with agencies across the region, joined their analysis. Dr. Mitchell, we've just received reports from Arizona and New Mexico. Based on the movement patterns of the collared mountain lions in those states, local agencies have located and raided 4 additional trafficking sites. They've rescued 8 victims and arrested 15 suspects. The scope of the network was staggering. What had begun as the rescue of a single abandoned baby had exposed a trafficking operation that spanned multiple states and involved dozens of criminals. And at the center of it all was a mountain lion whose behavior had transcended every scientific understanding of animal psychology. "Agent Foster," Sarah said, "there's something else. According to the GPS data, Marcus has been visiting the site where he found the baby every day since the rescue. He goes there at approximately the same time each day and remains for exactly 47 minutes before returning to his normal territory." 47 minutes. That's very specific behavior. It's the exact amount of time that elapsed between when he first found the baby and when the helicopter took her to safety. It's almost like he's commemorating the rescue, or... Sarah paused, struggling to find words for what she was thinking. Or what, Dr. Mitchell? Or he's checking to make sure she's still safe, like he's standing guard over a memory, making sure that what he protected that night remains protected, as the sun began to set over the Copper Creek mine, painting the sky in the same golden hues that had marked the beginning of this extraordinary story. Marcus prepared to leave the scene. The mountain lion approached Sarah one final time, his golden eyes meeting hers with an intelligence that defied explanation. In that moment, Sarah understood that she had witnessed something that would change how scientists viewed the relationship between humans and wildlife forever. Marcus hadn't just saved lives, he had demonstrated that empathy, protection, and justice weren't uniquely human traits. As Marcus disappeared into the wilderness, returning to his territory with the quiet dignity of a guardian whose work was complete, Sarah realized that the most important discoveries weren't always made in laboratories or academic institutions. Sometimes they were made in the wild places of the world, where the boundaries between species dissolved in the face of a greater moral imperative. 3 months after the rescue at Copper Creek Mine, Sarah Mitchell stood in the same clearing, where Marcus had first been discovered protecting an abandoned baby. The morning air was crisp with winter's promise, and snow dusted the surrounding mountain peaks. "He's been here for 45 minutes, Jake observed, watching Marcus from a respectful distance. Almost time for him to leave. Every morning, at exactly 8:15 a.m., Marcus would arrive at this clearing and position himself where he had protected baby Isabella Vasquez. He would remain for exactly 47 minutes before disappearing back into the wilderness. "It's like he's maintaining a memorial," Sarah said softly. The investigation Marcus had triggered led to dismantling one of the largest human trafficking networks in the Southwest. 47 victims were rescued from 17 locations across 3 states. Sarah's radio crackled. "Sarah, this is Dr. Williams at St. Mary's Hospital. I wanted to update you on Isabella." "How is she doing?" "She's thriving with her adoptive family. But yesterday, something remarkable happened. When they walked past a window facing the mountains, Isabella became extremely alert and reached toward them, like she was trying to touch something she remembered. The connection between the baby and her mountain lion guardian transcended scientific explanation, but Sarah knew it existed. As Sarah ended the conversation, Marcus did something unprecedented. Instead of disappearing into the forest, He walked directly toward them, stopping 20 feet away. His golden eyes fixed on Sarah with intelligent intensity. For several minutes, they remained motionless in interspecies communication. Then, Marcus lowered his massive head in what appeared to be a nod of acknowledgement, recognition of partnership, of shared purpose in protecting the innocent. Marcus rose and walked toward the forest, pausing at the tree line to look back one final time at the exact spot where he had found Isabella. He's saying goodbye, Sarah realized, to her memory of being here. Agent Rebecca Foster arrived with final news about the investigation. The last trafficking suspects were sentenced yesterday. Carlos Rodriguez received 25 years, and the network is completely dismantled. More importantly, we're establishing the Guardian Wildlife Program, using GPS data from collared animals to identify suspicious activity in remote areas. Jake had been monitoring the story's global impact. The documentary about Marcus has been viewed over 50 million times. Conservation programs worldwide have received unprecedented support. Marcus's story had resonated globally, inspiring appreciation for wildlife intelligence and moral capacity. More importantly, it sparked conversations about empathy and the responsibility to protect the innocent. I want to establish a research station here, Sarah decided. The Isabella Marcus Wildlife Research Center, where we can study bonds between species. Months later, wildlife cameras captured Marcus stopping his patrol to observe a family with a young child at a scenic overlook. He watched for exactly 47 minutes before returning to his territory. Whether Marcus recognized Isabella or was fulfilling his role as eternal guardian, the message was clear. Some bonds transcended understanding, and true guardianship lasted a lifetime. The story had become more than a rescue operation. It was testament to empathy's power to bridge any divide, reminding the world that protection and compassion weren't human innovations, but fundamental forces existing wherever life struggled to survive. In the quiet Colorado wilderness, Marcus continued his daily vigil, a living reminder that some promises are kept not because they are understood, but because they are right. Fimda Historia. Dear friends, we hope Marcus and Isabella's incredible story has moved you as much as it has moved millions of people around the world. This tale of cross-species compassion and the power of protection reminds us that empathy knows no boundaries. If this extraordinary story touched your heart, we invite you to join our community of storytellers and dreamers. Subscribe to our channel to discover more amazing tales that celebrate the remarkable connections between all living beings. Hit the like button to help us share these inspiring stories with others who need to hear them. In the comments below, tell us about a time when you witnessed unexpected compassion or protection in your own life. Every day, we bring you new stories that explore the depths of courage, love, and the incredible bonds that unite us all. Don't miss our upcoming stories of hope and transformation. We're waiting to hear from you in the comments, because every story deserves to be shared, and every act of kindness deserves to be celebrated. Dear friends, we hope Marcus and Isabella's incredible story has moved you as much as it has moved millions of people around the world. This tale of cross-species compassion and the power of protection reminds us that empathy knows no boundaries. If this extraordinary story touched your heart, we invite you to join our community of storytellers and dreamers. Subscribe to our channel to discover more amazing tales that celebrate the remarkable connections between all living beings. Hit the like button to help us share these inspiring stories with others who need to hear them. In the comments below, tell us about a time when you witnessed unexpected compassion or protection in your own life. Every day, we bring you new stories that explore the depths of courage, love, and the incredible bonds that unite us all. Don't miss our upcoming stories of hope and transformation. We're waiting to hear from you in the comments, because every story deserves to be shared, and every act of kindness deserves to be celebrated.